I never had any interest in women to begin with, so I never wanted to get married. But I did because my mom insisted I marry you. Now that mom's gone, I see no reason to have a wife at all." These hurtful words were hurled at me by my husband, Thomas. This happened the day Thomas just returned from a business trip. A photo fell out of his wallet. It showed Thomas, a woman in her 30s, and a young boy, all looking happy together. Almost like a family photo. Folded up small and tucked with the photo was a piece of paper. It was a divorce petition, already filled out with Thomas's name, suggesting he wanted a divorce from me, perhaps to marry this woman. I brought this up with my relatives, Robert and Jennifer. When I consulted them about what I should do, they came up with a suggestion. So, while Thomas was away for a week, I quickly filed for divorce and implemented the plan Jennifer had thought of. Now, I wonder how Thomas will react to the drastically changed home upon his return. My name is Lisa, a 45-year-old housewife. I've been married for over 20 years to the son of a wealthy family. We have no children. That's because Thomas, the only son of his elderly parents, always wanted to be the center of attention and disliked children. Yet, from what I've seen, his parents were both good people who didn't seem to spoil him. He just grew up to be a man with a strong sense of possessiveness. Our parents introduced us. The first time we met, he seemed disinterested in women. I wondered if he really intended to marry. Seeing Thomas, he struck me as someone who met me because his parents told him to, which was rare even back then, making me hesitant about marriage. However, Sandra, my mother-in-law, was an old acquaintance of my mother, and I had met her several times as a child. Kind and gentle, Sandra really knew me. She took my hand and said kindly, "I'm sure you'll make Thomas happy, Lisa." Those words moved me. I thought, if such a kind mother raised him, he must be a good person. So, I decided to marry him. After getting married, we started living with his parents, but 2 years later, Mark, my father-in-law, passed away in his 60s. Sandra became deeply depressed and soon needed care due to a sudden illness. As Thomas was busy being a company president, I mainly took care of Sandra with the help of home health aides. 20 years passed. Despite my devoted care, Sandra quietly passed away. Losing her, whom I loved dearly, left me devastated. Yet, Thomas, her actual son, didn't show any sign of sadness. Instead, he acted as if he had become the absolute ruler of the house, showing a complete change in behavior. Thomas had always been quiet at home since the beginning of our marriage. Since Mark passed away, he has been working late every night as the president of the company inherited from his parents. Because of this, he rarely paid attention to our home life, leaving all the important household decisions to me. But I didn't mind it. He was always a man of few words, even when we first met, and Sandra had told me, "Thomas may seem gruff and not talk much, but he's not a bad kid." So, for the past 22 years, I've just accepted that we didn't talk much as a couple. However, after Sandra's death, I've felt Thomas becoming increasingly harsh with me. Things he used to do himself, he now orders me to do. "Hey, why didn't you prepare my change of clothes for my bath?" "What? You usually do it yourself." "Not what? As my wife, it's only natural for you to take care of your husband." Sure, as a housewife, maybe I should be taking care of these things, but until now, he's never asked me for such trivial favors. I was surprised by his sudden change, but complied obediently. "All right, sorry. I'll get your change of clothes ready." Maybe he didn't say anything before because I was busy taking care of his parents. Perhaps he couldn't act superior in front of them. I was just baffled by Thomas's behavior. Being mostly at home, I didn't have any close friends to talk to about these things. The only person I could confide in was Jennifer, who often visited our home during weekdays. Jennifer is Thomas's cousin, Robert's wife. Robert's father is Mark's brother, but since his brother had children first, Robert is 5 years older than Thomas, at 50. His wife, Jennifer, is also older than me, at 48, and has always been a reliable source of advice. Today, as our husbands were at work, Jennifer came over to visit. Seeing me at the door, she looked concerned and peered into my face. "Lisa, what's wrong? You look pale." Surprised by her question, I touched my cheek and widened my eyes. "Do I? I hadn't noticed." "Have you been going through something tough recently? If you want, you can talk to me about it." Indeed, I've been feeling disgruntled with Thomas lately. I decided to share with Jennifer about how Thomas has changed since Sandra's passing. It turned into a bit of a rant, but Jennifer listened quietly. "I'm sorry, I haven't had anyone to talk to about this, so it just built up." "That's okay. It's tough, especially with him suddenly becoming short-tempered when he used to be so calm." Jennifer seemed to be pondering something. Her husband Robert is the executive vice president of Thomas's company and often talks about work at home. Jennifer might be recalling something she heard from Robert about Thomas at the company. Robert looked at me as if he had an idea. "He seems like, how do I put it, he always wants to be on top. From what I hear, that's how he acts at the company." I was surprised by her words. "Really? Thomas at home doesn't seem like that at all. I never noticed." "What does it mean for him to want to be on top?" "Thomas has always been quiet, just reading the newspaper at home, so I never thought about what other sides he might have." As I shared this, she slightly smiled and said, "I have a friend who lived with her husband's parents, and it seems common for husbands to push the responsibility of their parents onto their wives and act docile at home. But such husbands often become authoritative once the parents pass away, so it's definitely something to be wary of." Thinking about it, that might be true. He is exactly like that now. Thank you, Jennifer. It was good to talk about it. I'll keep that in mind when dealing with Thomas from now on. Yes, do that. And if anything happens, make sure to contact me. Talking to her made me feel better. That night, I found myself humming happily while doing the household chores. When Thomas got home and saw me, he looked puzzled. "What's with the carefree face and humming?" "Oh, welcome back." My cheerful response seemed to irritate him further, his expression growing sterner. Curious about his obvious displeasure at my good mood, I casually asked, "You seem to be in a bad mood. Is something wrong?" "Nothing's wrong. It's just, seeing you doing household chores with such a carefree look annoys me." "Why is that?" I couldn't understand what Thomas meant. Did he dislike that I, who have been a housewife for these 22 years, was doing household chores? While pondering this, Thomas muttered loud enough for me to hear, leaving me speechless. "Useless now that there's no need for caregiving and we don't have kids." So, Thomas thinks I'm lounging around because I'm no longer burdened with Sandra's care, despite the fact that not having children was his decision. What should I say in response? Arguing back might only worsen the situation. I decided to take a moment to calm down. "Maybe you're right. Now that I have more time, I should look for a job. Hey, just so you know, taking a part-time job around here is out of the question. It'd look bad for the wife of a wealthy family to work part-time in the neighborhood." Thomas, indeed as Jennifer mentioned, started acting arrogantly right after Sandra passed away, clearly wanting to appear superior to those around him. It reminded me again how men seem to feel they're on top once their parents are gone. If part-time is not an option, maybe I'll look for a full-time position then. But halfway through, I hesitated, worried about my ability to suddenly work full-time after 22 years. Thomas, noticing my silence, poured out more harsh words. "I never wanted to marry in the first place since I'm not interested in women. Mom insisted I marry you. But now that Mom's gone, I don't see the need for a wife." "What?" Well, meeting you was more about maintaining appearances as the future president." Thomas kept on, taking advantage of my inability to retort. This might be beyond just arrogance. Thinking about my future with Thomas filled me with dread. So, are you saying you want me to leave? No, I didn't say that. Just think about what you can do for yourself while I'm gone on a business trip for a week starting tomorrow. Why does Thomas only speak so domineeringly? Realizing arguing was futile, I simply responded, "Okay." During Thomas's week-long business trip, I spent my time in a state of dissatisfaction. I considered just leaving and going to live with my mother, Betty. But, doubting my own capabilities, I lacked the confidence to make it on my own if we divorced. After all, my mother had raised me by herself. I couldn't possibly burden her now. As these thoughts weighed on me, my mobile phone rang. It was my mother calling, so I quickly answered. "Lisa, it's been so long. How have you been?" "I'm fine, Mom." Hearing my mother's voice after such a long time gave me a bit of joy. My mom is currently working hard in a place far away, making it impossible for her to come visit right away. That's why she couldn't attend Sandra's funeral. She had been close friends with Sandra and regretted not being able to attend, but she mentioned she'd be coming back soon since her work has finally slowed down. The thought of seeing my mother again soon made me happy. "I'm really looking forward to seeing you." "Yes, we'll need to make a proper visit to Sandra's grave to apologize for my absence at the funeral." My mother has profound reasons for feeling so deeply about Sandra. I'm really looking forward to the day she comes back. Even after ending the call, my spirits were still high. Then, Thomas returned from his business trip. He was much later than expected. It was already past midnight. Seeming to have been drinking, Thomas was staggering drunk. "Hey, I'm home now." As soon as he said that, he fell at the entrance without taking off his shoes, making a loud noise, and then fell asleep right there. So, I took off his shoes and, with Thomas's arm over my shoulder, carried him to the bedroom. While I was carrying him, his wallet fell from his pocket, so after I had settled Thomas, I picked it up. The wallet was open, with bills and cards spilling out. As I gathered them to put back into the wallet, I noticed a small instant camera photo inside. Looking closely, it was a picture of Thomas with a woman in her 30s and a young boy, all looking happy together. Almost like a family photo. A folded piece of paper lay with the photo. Opening it, I discovered it was a divorce petition, already filled out with Thomas's name. So, he wants to divorce me and marry this woman? I tried to wake Thomas by shaking his shoulder. "Thomas, wake up for a second." Thomas barely opened his eyes and started mumbling in his sleep. "Huh? Lisa, take care of all my stuff." "What?" Was he referring to tidying up his belongings from the trip? But then, that wouldn't account for all his belongings. Since clothes can be cleaned at hotels during business trips, meaning there should be less luggage. Perhaps he's planning to divorce and leave the house. But that would mean I'd become the head of the household. This house has been passed down through generations, so I can't decide alone about the house. Thinking this, I called Robert and his wife Jennifer, the closest relatives I have, first thing the next morning. It was Sunday, so Robert was at home, but Jennifer answered the phone. "Ah, Jennifer? Sorry for calling so early in the morning. I wanted to discuss something while Thomas is asleep." "Yeah, I'm up early anyway. But it sounds like something's up." I explained about the photo and the divorce petition found in Thomas's wallet, and that he told me to take care of all his stuff. Jennifer, consulting with Robert next to her, tried to think of some advice. Then, I heard Robert's voice in the background. "A week-long business trip?" Robert sounded puzzled. That made me question it too. "Jennifer, could you put Robert on the phone?" After I asked, Robert came on the line. "Hello? What's this about the boss being away on a week-long business trip?" "Well, Thomas often says he's going on long business trips and leaves home for a week at a time." "There's never been such a long business trip for the boss. When he says he's on a business trip, it's usually just for 1 to 2 nights. Robert's words sparked something in me. Fake long business trips, and photos with an unknown woman and a child who looks like hers. After sharing this, Robert seemed to have an idea and said, "Could that be? Lisa, do you have that photo with you now?" "Yes, I do." "Then, could you take a picture of it with your mobile phone and send it to either me or Jennifer?" Following his request, I quickly took a photo of the photo with my mobile phone and sent it to Jennifer. After seeing the image, Robert informed me, "This woman, she used to work at our company. So it was true." "What's going on, Robert?" I asked, and Robert replied with a slightly uncomfortable tone. "Well, this woman, Angela, she was our office clerk until 2 years ago." Robert explained that there were rumors around the office that Angela, the clerk, was having an affair with Thomas, the president, and that she had resigned 2 years ago. At that time, some employees speculated she might have been pregnant. If the child in the photo was born from that pregnancy, his age would nearly match. If this story is true, then Thomas is likely the father of the child. Could it be that Thomas was visiting this mother and child during his so-called long business trips? Perhaps thinking it's better for women to discuss such matters, Robert handed the phone back to Jennifer. "Lisa, are you okay? Keep your spirits up. I've thought of something good." Jennifer then advised me on what to do next. After consulting with Robert about matters concerning the house, being close and regularly discussing everything with Jennifer, our conversation flowed smoothly even in this situation. "Thank you, Jennifer. Thomas will be gone for a week starting the day after tomorrow, so I'll take action then." Indeed, Thomas was planning a long business trip starting the day after tomorrow, leaving the house empty for a week. This timing was perfect for me, because my mother would be returning in 3 days. I informed my mother about Thomas and Jennifer's suggestion via email. The next day, I prepared for Thomas's fake business trip. Thomas, impressed by my preparations, commented, "See, you can do it when you try. It would be nice if you could always manage things like this without being told." It seemed Thomas didn't remember what he said that night, probably because he was drunk. "Oh, I forgot to tell you, my mom's coming back the day after tomorrow. You'll be on your trip, so you won't see her, but I'll send her your regards." "Huh, the mother working far away is coming back? She looked so poor in her shabby clothes at our wedding." Thomas always speaks ill of my mother like this. It's not like she was working away to be derogatory. He just assumes we were a poor family because I came from a single-parent home. I don't bother correcting him, it's too much hassle. The next morning, Thomas left the house. Right after, I started acting on Jennifer's advice. The following day, just before noon, my mother arrived at our house. Jennifer, wanting to meet my mother too, joined us, and the 3 of us went out to eat. My mother, despite calling it a visit, was busy with work and could only spare today. She had to leave tonight. "I saw your email. You've been through a lot. But the house is all tidied up now." "Yeah, sorry about that. Since you came back, we had nothing at home and had to eat out. Did you get my part sorted out?" "Yes, perfectly. It was sudden, so we couldn't go together, but I'm always ready for you." My mother handed me an airplane ticket while saying this. "Lucky you, Lisa. It seems everything will work out." I'm curious to see how Thomas reacts when he returns. "Yeah, it's all thanks to Jennifer. I'd be lost without her." I was truly grateful for having a strong ally like her. And it was fortunate timing that my mother could return just when needed. Over the next 4 days, I quickly arranged everything and filed for divorce. Then, I left on a plane with the ticket my mother gave me. At dawn, checking my mobile phone, I noticed several missed calls. As expected, they were from Thomas. Waiting for him to call again, it wasn't long before his call came through. "Hey! Why didn't you answer your phone?" "I just woke up." "Huh? It's past noon." Thomas said that, but it was early morning where I was. "Well, that doesn't matter. What does matter is I came home to find the house empty. Where did you take all my stuff?" "Oh, you told me to take care of all your stuff. So, I threw everything away.
What? When did I ever ask you to do that?
Thomas, apparently due to his drunkenness at the time, seems to have no recollection of it all. He continued to question further.
Also, the car seems to be missing. Did you take it? And where are you now?
I'm in France, at my mom's house. My response seemed to leave Thomas speechless for a moment, as there was a pause of silence. Since he didn't retort, I continued the conversation. Oh, about the car, I sold it before we moved. And the house has been sold too, so please move out as soon as possible.
Wait a minute. First off, your mother being in France has to be a lie, right? Lying won't help. Come back immediately.
Thomas was unaware of my mother's success in managing an apparel brand in France. And the poor-looking dress my mother wore to our wedding was actually her own design, a product of her brand. Thomas, unfamiliar with the brand, probably thought it looked poor. Looking back, Thomas had never involved himself in discussions between our families even before we got married. He just assumed my mother was laboring away somewhere far because I came from a single-parent home. Sandra was a regular customer at my mother's store in Japan. That's why my mother was close to Sandra, and I knew Sandra since I was a child. When I explained all this, he suddenly burst out laughing. Are you kidding? I get your mother's story, but this house has been passed down in my family. You can't just sell it. I sighed, realizing he was going to say something like this. Ah, it seems you weren't aware of something important.
What are you talking about?
Sandra had left a will giving me the house and land in recognition of the 20 years I spent caring for her. It seemed Sandra understood that although Thomas had taken over Mark's company, he was an unreliable president, leaving all significant responsibilities to Robert, the executive vice president. And Thomas, doing nothing at home, had left even the purchase of the car to me. Therefore, the car was registered in my name. Thomas hadn't fulfilled his role in either the family or the company. So, Sandra, worried about my future, entrusted me with everything. Robert and Jennifer had agreed to this during a family meeting. Though Thomas was present, he hadn't paid any attention and knew nothing about it. So, that's the situation. And about your fake long business trips, the company already knows. You were going to see that woman Angela, weren't you? Thomas raised his voice when I mentioned Angela. I continued as if delivering the final blow. Angela's child is yours, right? There was quite a bit of talk about your relationship within the company. Right now, Robert is looking into the resignation records. Resignees have to be kept on file for 3 years by law. Even when I asked, Thomas didn't respond. He probably left everything about the company to Robert. Knowing Robert, he would personally go to Angela's place to find out the truth. Seemingly resigned, Thomas murmured loudly, "Just come back once, will you? I want to talk things through properly with Lisa. After all, we are married." Oh, we're not married anymore. I've signed and submitted the divorce papers you brought back from your fake business trip. Shocked, Thomas exclaimed.
Why would you do such a thing? That was just to reassure Angela because she kept nagging about when we would get divorced. I never intended to divorce you.
Creating a child elsewhere, yet refusing to divorce. That must be his concern for appearances. Trying to maintain his marriage with me, his official wife, while also valuing his mistress. But I'm no longer swayed by such thoughts. There are still matters to settle regarding the sale of the house and division of property. So, I'll be returning to the US once. We'll talk more then, I said and hung up. A month later, I returned to the US to handle various procedures. Without a home, we gathered at Robert's house. There, not only Thomas, but also Angela and her son Anthony were present. Thomas seemed to be living with her now. Angela, holding Anthony, looked at me fearfully. I never intended to steal Thomas. He forced himself on me. Now, I'm just overwhelmed with raising a child, so I really can't afford any compensation. Angela appeared to be a timid woman. Yet, she was desperately defending her position before I had even asked anything. There's no need to be so frightened. I won't demand any money from you. It's Thomas who will be compensating. Pointing at Thomas, I said this, and his eyes widened.
That's the same thing. Taking money from me will only make life harder for Angela and Anthony.
It seems a paternity test confirmed that the child was indeed Thomas's. Well, that's the consequence of having an affair. You two will just have to do your best. Thomas seems to need to start job hunting too. My words left Thomas and Angela frozen. The rumor of the affair and the resulting child, leading to the divorce from me, his official wife, spread throughout the company. A meeting was held without Thomas, deciding that he would resign, and Robert, the executive vice president, would take over as president. Jennifer kept me updated on these developments. After explaining everything to Thomas, Robert placed a hand on Thomas's shoulder. So, Mr. President, you will be resigning at the end of this month. Thomas froze, eyes wide open, unable to move. Beside him, Angela, holding Anthony, was shedding tears. I felt sorry for their son, Anthony, for what had happened. But now, it's undeniable that Thomas and Angela, as his parents, need to support him together. Later, I received an email from Thomas. According to it, Thomas, now unemployed, was being supported by Angela, who worked part-time. However, despite this, Thomas did not participate in childcare at all. Unable to bear it anymore, Angela left Anthony with her parents. Alone with Thomas, the situation worsened as he began to shout at her. It was clear what would happen if he spoke such harsh words to a woman who seemed so timid. Angela, in tears, returned to her parents and never came back. As a result, Thomas fell into poverty and, not knowing what to do, emailed me. When I didn't reply and left him be, he called me.
Lisa, why are you ignoring me? It's your fault everything turned out this way. I've lost everything now, money, job. What am I supposed to do now?
The money, including what I received as compensation and from selling the house and land, should have been divided between us. He likely squandered it, given his lack of financial sense. Fed up with his selfish complaints, I retorted.
What? You're acting like you're the only victim here? You turned my life into a mess by choosing me as a spouse just for appearances. I could have married someone better. How will you compensate for ruining my life?
Of course, I didn't mean it. But Thomas, possibly believing it, seemed at a loss for words and just ended the call with, "Fine. Fine." Thomas, showing no remorse for his actions in either his career or family life, will likely continue to struggle finding work and live in poverty. Though I once accused Thomas of ruining my life, I now view all experiences as valuable and maintain a positive outlook. Despite everything, I'm currently enjoying life in France with my mother, studying French. I aim to leverage my 20 years of caregiving experience to pursue a career in care here, as France has many care facilities. My mother, just over 70 and still actively working, I plan to eventually take care of her. However, when I mention this to her, she slightly puffs up and says, "I'm still in the prime of my life. I doubt I'll need any care while I'm alive." Her bravado makes her seem all the more strong and dear to me. My mother lives life on her own terms, without concern for appearances. She remains my eternal role model as a woman. Therefore, I plan to keep pursuing my dreams by her side. Can they just sleep on the floor since they're dirty? My son's wife, Linda, said this with an ugly laugh. Beside her, my son Michael also had a disdainful smile. "You two can sit on top of some cardboard." Then, she pointed to a piece of cardboard carelessly placed nearby, as if she was dealing with something filthy. I felt a deep revulsion for them both, no matter that they were my own children. I couldn't tolerate it anymore. Estrangement. That word flashed through my mind. Shall we go home? My husband James said, turning around, as if he had read my thoughts. Yes. I don't want to stay here any longer. I replied immediately to his words, eager to get away from these two as soon as possible.
It seems we're not welcome, so we'll be leaving. And we'll be estranging ourselves from Michael and the others.
That's totally fine with me. And with that, we left without even entering their house, without seeing our grandchildren's faces. A few hours later, while having coffee with James, we enjoyed a peaceful moment. Then, Michael called James's mobile phone. James glanced at Michael's name and chose to ignore the call. Watching this, I smiled, thinking Michael must be facing a hard time now. I am Mary, a 51-year-old working mother with a part-time job. I have a husband, James, and 2 sons. James and I met through our parents' introduction. I was drawn to James, who was kind and serious, and he liked my gentle nature, so we started dating immediately. A few years later, we got married. Soon after, we were pregnant with our first child, Michael.
You've done well, Mary. Thank you so much,
he said to me with tears in his eyes. Not only him but also my in-laws praised me, delighted that their first grandchild was a boy, saying, "You did well." 2 years later, we had our second child, Daniel. Both boys, they kept us busy with their energetic antics.
I got a perfect on the test again.
Wow, that's amazing, Michael. You've worked hard on your studies, good job. As he grew, he became a child recognized by everyone as exceptional. He studied diligently and had excellent athletic abilities. Meanwhile, Daniel was.
I heard you helped a kid who was being bullied. You're such a kind soul, Daniel.
Thanks, Mom. I just had to help them, no matter what. He grew up to be a kind-hearted person, always ready to lend a hand to those in trouble and gentle towards animals. While cherishing their different personalities, we frequently discussed as a family and continued to watch over the paths the two of them would take. Both left home at the time of going to college.
Being alone at home feels so unsettling. Maybe I should start a part-time job.
That sounds good. It's worth trying something new. Afterward, freed from child rearing, I consulted with James and decided to start a part-time job. I began working at a nearby supermarket, which seemed to suit me. The work environment was pleasant, and I enjoyed my job.
It's great you found something you enjoy,
James said that, looking at me happily. Moreover, he started to take on more household chores, saying,
"We're a dual-income couple now."
He had always tried to help out by doing what he could, seeing me run ragged by our sons. So, I told him, but James just smiled warmly. You've done more than enough already. You don't have to go to such lengths.
I love you, Mary, and I want to be useful.
Without any embarrassment, he expressed his feelings. I am grateful to have him and our family as we live our peaceful, everyday life. One day, I'm coming over to the house. Michael sent such a message out of the blue. Surprised by the suddenness, both James and I, being off work and at home. Therefore, we sent Michael our consent and decided to wait.
It's unusual for him to reach out like this.
Indeed. He didn't even show his face when Daniel was getting married. After leaving home, Michael rarely returned or even contacted us. At most, we informed him last year that Daniel was getting married, to which he just replied, "Understood," and didn't attend the wedding. Can't get in touch with Michael. Haven't you heard anything?
No. I've only received understood message from him as well.
Both James and I, and even Daniel himself, couldn't get a reply about attending the wedding from Michael, despite numerous attempts. After many attempts by Daniel, he said he's too busy with work to attend.
To miss his own brother's wedding?
He said, "I won't waste my time for a useless brother." Such a disrespectful message was sent. Seeing that, both James and I sighed deeply. Michael had always looked down on Daniel. Michael, excellent in academics and sports.
Michael is truly amazing.
Michael is our pride. Such was the adoration he received from his grandparents. Watching him play outside.
Such a boyish spirit is good to see. Our grandson is just as expected.
They often expressed such views. On the other hand, Daniel, who enjoyed reading and quietly spent time in his room.
With such nice weather, to stay in the corner of a room.
Such a gloomy child. Frowning, the in-laws said that. I couldn't believe their words and always argued back.
If you say such things, I won't let you see your grandchildren.
James was clear about it, and upon hearing that, the in-laws who wanted to see Michael quickly apologized. Michael was also fond of them, saying,
"I want to see Grandpa and Grandma."
So we reluctantly let them meet. Daniel, on the other hand, was close to my parents.
I love being in Grandpa's study and talking with them.
My dad is also a reader, with lots of books in his study, and Daniel would scrutinize which book to read with sparkling eyes every time we visited. And he would happily share his thoughts with him. That's why Daniel preferred going to my parents' house over the in-laws.
Are we going to Grandpa's house next time? Wonder which book I'll read.
But I want to go to other grandparents' house.
Last time we went to my parents' house because Michael insisted on it. This time, we're going to Mary's parents' house.
Both of our parents' homes were within cycling distance, and we tried to visit them equally. Oh, did you go to grandparents' place?
Yeah. I went to return a book. Michael seems to be at Grandpa's house too.
As they grew up, both started to go on their own. Surely, the in-laws were spoiling Michael and bad-mouthing Daniel. Even if we tried to blame them, there was no proof.
Did you go to your father's place again?
No.
I was at a friend's house near there.
Michael also denied it, saying,
I didn't go. I haven't seen the in-laws.
However, he was undoubtedly influenced by the in-laws and developed a disdainful attitude towards Daniel. Every time he said something oppressive about Daniel, we scolded him, but it seemed futile. What's wrong? Remembering the past, I inadvertently sighed. James asked with concern. It's nothing. Just wondering what he wants. Hopefully, it's not trouble. He nodded at my words. And 4 hours after the scheduled time. He's here.
You're quite late.
You were probably just lazing around anyway. Unabashed, Michael entered the house. Following him was a woman. While we were puzzled by the sudden visit, the two quickly sat down on the living room sofa. Michael, who is this?
My wife, Linda. We got married.
The words uttered by Michael shocked us so much that we exclaimed loudly. Not we're getting married, but we got married as it was announced after the fact.
Normally, you'd come before getting married.
We were in a hurry. Apparently, Linda is pregnant. Now that they mention it, Linda's belly does seem large. So, she wasn't suffering from morning sickness, and we decided to have the wedding before it became noticeable. I understand the situation, but why didn't you tell us? And we weren't invited to the wedding. At our question, Michael sneered unpleasantly.
We didn't want to invite such shabby people to our glamorous ceremony.
We were stunned by his words. What did Michael just say? Shabby? Us? Exactly as Michael said, truly shabby indeed. Linda said, laughing mockingly as if to ridicule us. Feeling sickened by such behavior.
Linda comes from a wealthy family. Her father is a CEO, and I work at his company. Her mother is from a noble family too, so they're in a different class than us.
Michael said mockingly. I wonder why he looks down on his own upbringing so much.
Then, what do you want by coming here?
James asked with a cold voice. He must be angry at being ridiculed by them.
I told you, Linda is pregnant. Unlike Daniel's wife who can't have children.
Daniel's wife, Susan, has been his childhood friend who lived nearby. They started dating in high school and got married right after graduating from college. Susan apparently has a condition that makes it difficult for her to get pregnant.
I'm fine with that. Susan is the only one for me.
And having Daniel is more than enough for me. They had discussed this matter several times. It's Daniel and Susan's issue. As long as the two of them are okay with it, we're not particularly bothered. Yet, bringing this up all of a sudden made me frown.
Unlike the worthless Daniel's wife, Linda will give you grandchildren. You should at least show some gratitude, right? Speak clearly. What do you want? A baby gift? It's not just that. Visiting the house and helping out is the role of a mother-in-law, isn't it?
Michael said, with Linda joining him in a nasty grin. They're indirectly telling me to come over and do household chores. Then, James silently stood up.
It would be an honor to be of use to you.
Once James was out of sight, Linda started saying that.
Right. Since you'll get to hold your grandchild, it's only natural you do as much.
Linda and Michael agreed, leaving me puzzled. If it were Susan, I'd gladly help. But I don't want to assist people who look down on others. Just as I was about to say something, James returned with an envelope in hand.
Take this and leave. My wife has a part-time job and doesn't have the time to care for you. Besides, if your family is so prestigious, hire a professional housekeeper.
James said this while glaring at them. Michael seemed upset by these words, but took the envelope without saying anything.
What a waste of time.
Muttering, Michael and Linda left. Watching them go, I sighed deeply, pondering the future.
I thought I was careful, but did I raise him wrong?
As I felt uneasy about Michael and Linda's attitude, a notification sound came from my mobile phone. It was a message from Susan.
We're planning a trip with Daniel. Would you like to join us?
A lovely invitation message with cute stickers. Feeling healed by it, I replied, Thank you for the invitation. Would you like to come over for dinner? They were delighted by the invite, so we decided to have Daniel and Susan over for dinner.
Thank you for inviting us today. I love Mary's cooking, so I'm really happy.
We welcomed them at the agreed time and had a lively dinner, during which we talked about Michael and Linda.
That wife, could she possibly be?
Susan muttered, having heard our story. Apparently, Susan works at the same company as Linda's father. So, she knew of Linda's existence, though in a different department. According to Susan, Linda is infamously known for the bad reasons.
I did hear she was going on maternity leave,
Susan mentioned. Daniel seemed thoughtful beside her.
Thanks for letting me know. They might contact me next. It's good to be prepared.
Indeed, if Michael couldn't make me a housekeeper, he might next tell Daniel.
Send Susan over as a housekeeper. If Susan gets outed as an employee at the same company, they might say, do it if you don't want to be fired. So, Daniel, make sure you protect her.
Daniel nodded firmly at his words. Several months later, I receive another message from Michael on my mobile phone.
Our child has been born. So, we're having a baby gift event at our new home.
We're inviting you too as a courtesy." Such a condescending message was sent. Honestly, I don't feel like going. But he is my son, after all.
Well, I guess we'll attend, but only out of obligation.
Right. We'll decide our future relationship based on their attitude at the baby gift event. We agreed to participate in the baby gift and visited their new home using the address provided. Welcome.
Ah, so you did came.
It sounds like you're surprised we actually showed up. Greeted by Linda and Michael at the door. James responded to their greeting, which was met with an insincere smile and, "Not at all. Well, come in." But upon entering, there's no sight of our grandchild. Asking them about it, we're told the child is out with Linda's parents. Please wait in the living room until the parents return. However, as we were about to sit down, Linda stopped us.
Wait! That's my parents' seat.
Then where should we sit? Linda pointed to the floor in response to my question. Do you mind sitting on the floor since you're so dirty? She said this with a disgusting laugh, with Michael also smirking unpleasantly beside her. You too can sit on cardboard. Pointing to a carelessly placed piece of cardboard nearby. As if we were something dirty. Such behavior deeply disgusted me. As much as he is my own child. I can no longer tolerate it. Disownment. That word crossed my mind. Should we leave? James, sensing my thoughts, turned to me and suggested. Yes. I don't want to stay here any longer. I immediately agreed with his words. Because I wanted to get away from these two as soon as possible. Since we're obviously not welcome, we'll leave. And we'll be disowning both of you. That's totally fine with me. And so, we left without even entering their house, without seeing our grandchild's face. Once home, I blocked Michael's contact. Immediately, I called Daniel and told him about what had happened. Daniel and his family were also invited to the same baby gift event. I thought I'd warn them before they arrived at the new home.
Got it. Thanks for letting me know.
He responded coldly and hung up. Daniel resembles me in appearance, but his demeanor is all James. Normally calm, he treasures Susan deeply. But once he gets angry, he's uncontrollable. Michael had once angered Daniel and suffered terribly because of it. Forgetting that, he's probably getting ahead of himself. Let's have some coffee, shall we? Sure, I'd like that. Several hours later, James and I spent a leisurely time drinking coffee. Then, Michael calls James's mobile phone. James looks at Michael's name briefly before deciding to ignore it. Watching him. I can't help but think Michael is probably facing a tough time right now, and I smiled at the thought. Hey, where are we going for our next trip? Let's go somewhere famous this time. James responds with a smile to my question. And time flows by leisurely. Then, I get a message from Susan. What's up? It's from Susan. She's asking if she can come over now. Is that okay? Of course, let her. After giving our consent, Daniel and Susan arrive a few minutes later, both grinning broadly. You two seem very cheerful. Looks like you've had quite the rampage. Yes. Oh, I recorded it, so you must watch. Responding to our words, Susan shows us the video on her mobile phone with a smile. The recording starts with Daniel ringing the doorbell. The door's unlocked, just come in. Hearing that, Daniel and Susan enter the house. Reaching the living room. Wait, aren't you the famous novelist? A man and woman, presumably Linda and her parents, looked at Daniel's face in surprise. Daniel, a book lover, had become a novelist. His work won a Newcomers Award, and there were talks of media adaptations. He had appeared on TV due to this. The other family must have recognized him from TV. Seeing such a person suddenly show up seemed to shock them.
What? Daniel is the novelist everyone's talking about?
Not only Linda and her parents were surprised, but Michael, his brother, was too. Michael and Daniel hadn't seen each other in years. For Michael, Daniel was still the same as in his memories, and even seeing his changed appearance on TV didn't ring a bell. Since he only published under a pen name, they didn't realize it was him until they met in person.
I'm a fan of yours,
Linda said with a beaming smile. Linda's parents, Brian and Karen, also expressed their joy.
We're delighted to have such a popular novelist in the family. What? Become family with someone who ridicules their parents? I don't think so,
Daniel told them with a very nice smile. Suddenly, the other family froze. Then, it was Daniel's turn.
I know what you said about our parents. You made quite a mockery of them.
His words caused Linda's parents to frown. Unaware, Michael muttered back.
So you admit you're really shabby? What's so shabby? Are you saying your family is superior?
He coldly countered. Even through the video, Michael's discomfort under Daniel's intense gaze was palpable, and he averted his eyes.
Dad and Mom loved us equally, recognized our individuality, and supported us. Yet, you always been complaining.
That's
spoiled rotten by grandparents who indulged his every whim.
Daniel didn't let Michael get a word in, continuing to speak. Our reprimands, thinking of Michael, spoken behind our backs. Supporting Michael's desired university and arranging tutorials as he wished. We didn't make him struggle for tuition and gave him plenty of pocket money. Realizing how much we were watched over moved me.
You acted as if it was all due to you, but it wasn't. Our parents helped Michael out of genuine love. I can't understand Michael's disdain for them.
Daniel spoke non-stop. Michael was left speechless by his words. Then, he turned his gaze to Linda's parents, continuing.
And you? What kind of upbringing have you given your daughter? Mocking someone's parents, not inviting them to the wedding, only announcing a pregnancy, and then demanding money and care.
Michael and Linda looked troubled by these words. Before they could say anything, Brian spoke up.
Michael, I was told by you that my parents are bad influences on their children and didn't pay for education.
It seems Linda's parents were told by Michael that they only exploit me and have never done anything parental. That's why he always stayed with his grandparents. Not inviting them to the wedding was also because they might cause trouble and inconvenience others. Hearing Michael's explanation, Daniel deeply sighed.
Still painting the parents as the villains, huh? What exactly have those two exploited from you, Michael? The reason you went to Grandpa and Grandma's was because they spoiled him and gave him allowance,
Daniel said, causing Linda's parents to exchange looks.
If you've read my novel, you'd know who's more credible, right? It's about my gratitude towards my parents and overcoming the mockery from my grandparents.
Linda's parents nod at Daniel's words. Beside them, Linda makes a puzzled face.
Really?
Just from that, it's clear Linda hasn't read Daniel's book. How you can that you're my fan who even haven't read my book? He murmurs, sighing again. Then, he turns to us, or rather, to Susan, who is recording.
Let's go. Staying here any longer is pointless.
Yes, let's. The video ends there. Daniel, well said. You're my pride, James says after watching, and Daniel smiles happily. Immediately after finishing the video, loud noises came from the entrance.
Why are you ignoring my calls? What have you done?
Michael and Linda enter, yelling. Ah, that's right, I had given Michael a spare key. They must have used it to get in.
What do you want?
Daniel frowns at the noisy pair, ignoring them.
Susan, would you like a refill on your coffee?
Oh, no, thank you, don't bother.
Don't be shy.
James and I ignore the two, surprising Daniel and Susan. Meanwhile, Michael and Linda, oblivious to our reaction, start ranting.
It's all because of that woman. I got scolded by Dad.
It seems something Susan left behind has put them in a tight spot. That parting gift was an internal investigation at the company.
That's right. Because of what was written, my path to becoming the next CEO is now closed.
Apparently, not only Linda, but Michael's reputation was also bad. Initially, Michael worked diligently, but after marrying Linda, he became arrogant, claiming,
I'm the next CEO.
It seems the people around him could no longer keep up with him.
You've really done it now.
Linda was known for flirting with men at work and pushing her work onto them. If anyone disobeyed, she used her status as the CEO's daughter to pressure them into resignation. Thus, no one dared to refuse her requests. Furthermore, she would harass any woman who even slightly stood out. They left behind documents recording their deeds. Moreover, Linda's choice in men was questionable.
But whether that child is Michael's, I really can't say.
Leaving those words, Susan had left their house. Hearing Daniel and Susan's story, and presented with evidence, the other parents were furious. They ousted the two from the company, declaring,
You're disowned. If things stay this way, we'll be kicked out of that house too. Even the child might be taken away by my parents.
Apparently, Michael's new house was a baby gift from Brian. From the level of their anger, it seemed likely they would lose the new house as well. If that happens, Linda and I won't be able to raise the grandchild, was the concern. It's getting colder recently. I can't wait to warm up with a trip.
Right. By the way, Mary and I were discussing where to go. Do you have any place in mind?
Ignoring Michael and Linda, we continued to speak cheerfully to Daniel and Susan. At that moment, Michael looked at us for the first time, puzzled.
Dad? Mom? We were thinking, since it's a special occasion, why not go somewhere famous?
If you two don't mind, how about staying overnight? Michael spoke to us in a hurried manner, but we ignored him. After a brief struggle and receiving no response, let's go. Staying here is pointless.
Wait! What?
With shoulders slumped, Linda and Michael left. We need to change the locks, James muttered as the door closed. Daniel and Susan exchanged glances.
How about moving in with us? It might be better, considering they could come back.
Apparently, they had been considering living together for a while. We joyfully accepted their offer, sold this house, and moved in with them. Thanks to that, we no longer had to deal with Michael and Linda's disturbances and enjoyed a peaceful life. Soon after, they both were supposedly fired from the company. The president himself came to apologize. I'm sorry for not noticing my daughter's foolishness, he said. We were also apologized to by Linda's parents. They regretted misunderstanding us and not greeting us properly. Perhaps her parents weren't bad people. However, Brian being busy with his company and Karen running her beauty salon, they didn't spend much time with Linda. As a result, Linda developed such a personality. When they came to apologize, I asked how the two were doing. Michael and Linda, kicked out of the new house, went to their old house but found it sold. Stunned, they somehow managed to rent an apartment. Then, they started job hunting to make a living, but in such circumstances, they couldn't raise a child. Therefore, Linda's parents considered taking the child in but declined, saying, "We are not qualified to raise a child." So, it was decided that Daniel and Susan would take the child in. Fortunately, the child, William, truly is our grandchild, having Michael's blood.
It seems they intended to push the childcare onto me from the start. They usually left it to Karen or professionals.
"I'll raise him well," Susan said, holding William lovingly. Daniel was also eager to participate in raising him. Taken in by them, he is bound to be happy. I plan to support them as much as I can. Sometime later, Daniel received a message from Michael. "Now I understand how foolish I've been." Following this incident, Michael and Linda, whose relationship soured, divorced. Becoming lonely made Michael reflect on his actions. But regretting now is too late. When I said William and his parents wouldn't meet him, he was visibly disappointed. However, his repentance didn't seem genuine. According to Daniel, his attempt to show a changed heart seemed more like a plea for help for himself. Michael hasn't changed. So, we can just leave him be. Indeed, my parents influenced Michael negatively, but he's old enough to take responsibility. We won't reach out to him anymore. Thus, he was abandoned by us. He vanished into the entertainment district, having no one to rely on. But that's none of our concern anymore. As for Linda, despite being disowned by her parents and divorced from Michael, she couldn't lower her standard of living and ended up in debt. Unlike Michael, she didn't have our contact information, and being disliked by those around her, she couldn't seek help from anyone. Eventually, she was forced into tough jobs introduced by debt collectors. "Well, it's none of our business," I muttered, watching William sleep in my arms. Several years later.
Looking forward to the trip.
I never thought it would be postponed this much," James replied, nodding to James's words about the trip we had promised back then. We had just taken in William and were busy with moving and other things, so it had been postponed.
Right when we thought we'd settled down, Susan got pregnant.
We all celebrated that time. When William was about 3, Susan's pregnancy was discovered. Having 2 grandchildren filled us with joy. And now that Emily, William's sister, has grown a bit, we could finally go on that trip.
Grandma, Grandpa, I'm excited about the trip.
While talking with James, William runs over with a beaming smile. And we returned the smile to William, who talked with such happiness. "William, you know you shouldn't run, right?"
He is full of energy.
Daniel and Susan approach, saying this. In Daniel's arms is Emily, who reaches out her hand towards William as they get closer. The sight of the siblings getting along so well warmed our hearts.
"Then, shall we go?"
We nod at Daniel's words. And we start walking with smiles on our faces. There might be many challenges ahead. But I'm confident we can overcome anything as a family, supporting each other.